It's Christmas, 2023, and the 2017 Sonic game, Sonic Forces, sees the biggest spike in players that it has seen in 3 years. What's going on here? Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the level-headed fanboy, and we are kicking off 2024 by shining a spotlight on a fan creation that has graced us in the Christmas of 2023, Sonic Forces Overclocked. This fan-made mod for Sonic Forces boasts a total transformation of the base game into an entirely new adventure, serving as a follow-up to the events of Sonic Forces, complete with its very own storyline. Kinda like if Sonic Forces got a Final Horizon DLC, except this is more of a sequel than an alternate ending. It's an ambitious project that I've been following for a few years now, since the Overclocked team started putting out demos, and it's always been pretty impressive work, but now we finally have a finished version of the game. So, how does it shape up? Before we get stuck in, first of all, Happy New Year! I'm really hoping that 2024 can be the year where we finally reach 100k subscribers. After all, we're already at 93k. 3k in a year isn't too unrealistic, right? So if you love Sonic the Hedgehog, there is tons of Sonic stuff on my channel for you to check out. So if you subscribe, you won't be disappointed. And of course, if you're already subscribed but would like to support me a little further, you can do so by following the Patreon link in the description below. All pledges are hugely appreciated and do come with rewards. So naturally, we do need to cover a little backstory in order to kind of contextualize my review of Sonic Forces Overclocked. Sonic Forces isn't an outright bad game, but it does mark a low point in Sonic's history. After abandoning the experiment that was the Sonic Boom spin-off franchise, Sega were returning to the tried and tested with Sonic Forces, a game that would take the Sonic generation's classic and modern formulas and expand on this with a brand new, more involved story and an additional playable character in the form of a customizable avatar the player could create. What made Sonic Forces so contentious was that this revisitation of the tried and true was drastically inferior to its predecessors, completely missing the point of what made them good. It also relied far too much on recycled ideas to even distract from the major gameplay downgrades with new content. Worse yet, the game wasn't even substantial enough either, with levels feeling short and empty, a mere 2-hour runtime. Basically, Sega and Sonic Team's hearts just weren't in this one, and it showed. Now, there's a reason why I always buy Sonic games on PC nowadays. If Sega don't do the concept justice themselves, you can bet the fans will. And while that's not exactly the epitome of critical merit, we're at least getting some fun new experiences out of it. So, a toast to you video game modders and creators out there. You folks make everything better. So moving on to Sonic Forces Overclocked, we have a story clocking in at about 1 hour long. And I do just want to note that my standards for a fan project are naturally going to be different to that of an official budgeted project with a studio behind it. Yes, there are a lot of fan-made projects, especially in the Sonic franchise, that can match or, in some instances, eclipse the quality and substance of the official products, but that's not something to be taken for granted. The fact that the Overclocked team were able to add an entire extra hour to Sonic Forces is an achievement in of itself, and I do not want to underestimate that. Overclocked takes place after the events of Sonic Forces' story. Dr. Robotnik has sent Metal Sonic back into the Eggman Empire Fortress after the war to clean up and retrieve the Phantom Ruby. But when he does, rather than bringing it back to his master, Metal Sonic instead uses the Phantom Ruby to power up and regain his autonomy as Neo Metal Sonic. From there, he recruits Infinite, seals Dr. Robotnik in cyberspace, and the nightmare begins again for Sonic and pals. The story, like in the base game, takes a few different forms, including radio comms in the stages themselves, as well as on the world map. But replacing the cutscenes, we have fully voiced over animatics in the style of a comic book. Now, I think being realistic, this was probably done because animating new cutscenes for the game would be another huge undertaking for the animators on this project, especially considering that the gameplay is chock full of new character and environment animations. So gathering a separate group of artists to create these animatics was probably the more economic route to take. But at the same time, I absolutely adore this as a creative decision. It feels like a tribute to the IDW comics, which also initially served as a follow-up to the events of Sonic Forces. There's even some references to the IDW comics in this game, with the Resistance being renamed to Restoration HQ, and Amy wanting Sonic to rejoin the team after taking off, just like in the early IDW. There are some different art styles at play, and I understand why some may find this inconsistent, but viewing this as a fan project, I think it's nice that lots of different artists got to leave their mark on this project, and it all looks good in my opinion. The only downside is that if you do change the avatar's appearance, this won't be reflected in the cutscenes, but they do at least start you off with the avatar used in most of the marketing that appears in the cutscenes as well. As for the story itself, it is a lot better than the original game, partially because it's a lot simpler. Sonic Forces' story was all over the place, both logistically and tonally, and anytime it had a shot at doing something cool, it would undercut itself with a lame joke or a firm reminder that this game about a furry militia going up against Hitler with robots is made for ickle-wickle babies. That being said, this new story's okay. Again, simplicity is the merit here, but I feel like this one has some difficulty justifying Infinite's return. Neo Metal Sonic just kind of recruits him, and he gets a second shot. But I think Neo Metal would have been enough to carry this on his own. It also gets a little choppy when the Avatar is sent into null space but arrives on the Death Egg. There may have been an explanation for this, but the choppy pacing made it difficult to clock, or should I say overclock. Then the Avatar gets really bitter at Sonic about this, at a super inopportune moment that just makes the Avatar come off as a little unlikable. I think this was to give the Avatar some actual character and agency in the game aside from just being Sonic's little helper, and it also demonstrates Sonic's own humility, but I don't think this worked very well. The voice acting is all solid. Obviously not every character sounds much like their game's counterparts, but I think the performances are all good, especially considering that the folks here aren't necessarily all professional actors. I was never really taken out of the moment by a bad read. I love what they did with Neo Metal's voice. I like this tinny sort of militant voice a lot more than his deep, ghostly voice from Sonic Heroes, and I think Infinite was a standout too. The villains are the standout, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But everybody did a nice job. For example, Sonic. He doesn't really sound like Roger Craig Smith or really any of the game Sonic voice actors, but he does sound like Sonic, if that makes sense. The voice fits, he plays the character well, he's not impersonating any specific actor. If he did sound like one Sonic actor, I guess I'd say Jason Griffith. But even then, the resemblance is very little. I just think it's really cool that we had a fully voiced original story here, as opposed to this just being a level pack, which would have been cool too, but it is just nice to see them go the extra few miles. I don't take it for granted for even a second, and I think it's awesome. For the main story, we get 3 playstyles between 2 playable characters. Classic Sonic is not a part of this story, nor is he playable. Instead, we just get modern Sonic, the Avatar, and the pair are playable together as the tag team. And it's better for it. It feels like a full experience with just these two, without classic Sonic just interrupting the entire flow, and worse yet, being terrible in Sonic Forces. No doubt they probably would have fixed him up a bit, but yeah, no, glad he's not here. However, we do get Episode Metal, which gives us the Eggman Empire Fortress stage to play as Metal Sonic, who plays the exact same as the modern Sonic in this game, but it was a really fun prologue stage that I recommend playing before the main story. It's just that bit more immersive to find out how Metal Sonic found the Phantom Ruby, and I love how you can see the remains of the Death Egg robot, the final boss one from Forces, not the other Death Egg robot, laying in the wreckage, which is where he finds the Phantom Ruby. Great immersion is going to become a theme here. Sonic's character model and animations have been changed too. Gone is the vacant stare of the Sonic Forces standing pose devoid of any and all idle animations or blinking, replaced with a far more lively Sonic with a model that harkens more to his appearance in Sonic Unleashed, with a nice rich shade of blue and longer quills. While I do, unpopular opinion here, prefer the slightly shorter quills on the models of Lost World onward, the way the character model is utilized is more important than anything else. So Sonic looks a lot better in Overclocked than he does in the base game. I also much prefer this shade of blue. I also love how his ear twitches in the idle animations. It's such a nice touch, and it's really cute. The player controllers have been tweaked a little too. The acceleration between Sonic and the Avatar is a bit more predictable and gradual than it was in the base game, and movement feels a little less restrictive. While turns are still majorly assisted by the game's automated camera, it did still feel good moving Sonic in different directions, much more so than it does in the base game. Sonic has also been given Shadow's chain homing attack move as well, which is really cool. I'm happy to have that here. That being said, while the controls are greatly improved here, I wouldn't call them perfect or fixed necessarily. My biggest issue is the jump. It doesn't appear to have been changed much. Like in the base game, it's influenced by your momentum, so if you're running at top speed, it will favor forward movement over upward movement, making it pretty unreliable. Sometimes you could be running up to a platforming section about to make a big jump, only for Sonic to just do a little hop. This was a problem with the base game, but I do think more attention is drawn to it by the level design of this game being a bit more demanding than the base game. And the homing attack still has way too small of a targeting range. It's the Sonic Forces homing attack. It's not unworkable, but it's far from convenient. Really, how did Sonic Forces mess up the homing attack so badly? Speaking of level design, okay, I mean, the fact there's platforming here and the stages last more than a minute, it's already an improvement, get the confetti. Yeah, the stages in the base game were short to the point of feeling unsatisfying, but it was made worse by the fact they felt utterly empty, constantly wresting control away from the player, or giving us virtually nothing but hallways to boost through. Overclocked fills that space and then some. Stages last from around 3 to 4 minutes now, and are absolutely packed with platforming. It's not just that extra obstacles have been added to these stages, they've been completely reworked from top to bottom, mechanically and aesthetically. These stages feel a lot bigger with tons of different routes and paths to take. Stages aren't just longer, they feel bigger, vaster, wider. No longer just moving straight forward. There's a real sense of geography to these stages now. Previously superficial mechanics have been expanded upon. For example, grappling hooks where you have to time your jump correctly, and how there are now obstacles in the grapple drift section, meaning that you need to control your turns. Force's turning controls are maybe just a bit too slippery to truly pull this off, either that or I'm just bad at it, but still, it's nice to see this actually expanded on so it can be more than just a bit of purely visual spectacle. See, that's how Sonic Forces Overclocked improves on the original game. It's a game where you have to, do stuff. That being said, while the level design is a massive improvement on the original game, I still have some critiques. Yes, the stages are longer now, but I think they need to be a bit longer yet. Now that sounds like a tall order. Creating Sonic stages is difficult because you have to pack the stage with different stimuli and challenges, and then account for the fact that Sonic is just going to tear through this incredibly quickly. But I'm not asking for more stimuli or challenges. Literally, just stretch it out a little. So look at Dragon Road from Sonic Unleashed as an example of what I'm talking about. It's one of the more platform-heavy stages in the game, but between those more challenging areas, you've got lots of stretches for the player to just run. So they can kind of mentally prepare for what's next. Overclocked packs a lot into these stages, and that is absolutely a positive thing. It's a masterclass in thrilling, challenging, yet fair Sonic level design. But it's almost wall-to-wall challenges with little time to mentally prepare for what comes next, sometimes requiring near split-second reaction time. For one example, there was an instance where I used the air boost to vault over a more meticulous platforming challenge, only to then land in a bottomless pit. I just think we need a little more space to pull off fun maneuvers like this. This is made more difficult by just how much is going on screen, as the stage aesthetics are a lot more elaborate than the base game, and most of the official titles. So I just think doubling up on these instances where you can just kind of run through the scenery would complement the level of challenge and platforming there is this time. Maybe shift the camera upward a little in these instances so we can see what's ahead better. But okay, we have to talk about the level aesthetics this time because, wow, genuinely, this is incredible by any standard. So 5 of the locations from Sonic Forces have been adapted, 6 if you count the Eggman Empire Fortress in the Metal Sonic story. You've got Green Hill, Chemical Plant, the City, hey, I know that place, the Mystic Jungle, and the Death Egg. Mystic Jungle getting 2 acts and Death Egg also getting 2 acts and a boss. but these places have been completely transformed. I don't want official titles to keep finding excuses to bring back Green Hill Zone, but if they were to do it like this, where it actually serves much more of a purpose in the story and has been completely visually transformed, okay, count me in. As it is, I'm not going to dump on a fan game for using stages like Green Hill again. The standards are different. Even by official standards, the Overclocked team have nailed this. I adore the fact that the Green Hill opening stage starts off in Starlight Zone, which has been wonderfully brought to life with new assets, reminding me that seeing stages from the classics return in 3D can be a thrill when it's a stage we haven't seen in a while. But my jaw genuinely dropped when we seamlessly went from Starlight Zone to Green Hill all in the same stage. I can't really think of another instance where a Sonic level in a single act has had us run from one zone to another, as they tend to just go for a singular theme per act. But it gives Sonic's world such a sense of real geography, and I'm dying to see them do more of this. When a fan-made project does something that makes me go, damn, I didn't know I wanted that, and now I want that in the official products, you've nailed it. I also love Big the Cat making cameos in the background. Then when we get to Green Hill, we start running through a cave before the full Green Hill Zone is revealed to us, and we can see the extent of the damage the Phantom Ruby has done to it. This is an incredible piece of visual storytelling. Green Hill Zone is now on fire, covered in ash and dust. The vibrancy of the place is gone, but this is by no means visually dull. The fires contrasting with the ashy burnt Green Hill look wonderful, and it's so atmospheric. Even the Death Egg Sentinels in the background get in on the action as you run from a falling one at the end of the stage. This is excellent. This is how I would expect a war-torn Green Hill Zone to look. Not just dried up and sandy, it actually feels like part of the story. Like this place is hurting rather than just, hey look, remember Green Hill? Then I've always said it's harder to justify bringing back Chemical Plant than it is Green Hill. It's a far more specific location, so you need more of a specific reason to bring it back. The place needs to feel purposeful, as it's not just a natural environment that Sonic is likely to just run into, like with Green Hill. And in this case, we're instead focusing on cargo crates and the freight train tracks, rather than the usual blue tubes and yellow blocks. Excellent! We're exploring a new part of this familiar stage. Obviously, these assets were all present in the original Spaceport stage from Sonic Forces, but it was much more of a cosmetic background element. Here, we're actually running through shipping containers, dodging freight trains on the tracks. It's excellent. This is how you refresh a returning stage. Show us a new part of it and its purpose. Then from there, we've got the Sunset City stage, which I think is the last solo stage in the game, well, for Sonic anyway. So the city stages in Sonic Forces always had what I consider to be the quintessential aesthetic of the game. Sonic running through a city that's locked in an all-out assault? Amazing. So I'm pleased to see that this stage hasn't been transformed aesthetically as much as, say, the Green Hill or Chemical Plant stage. It's just taken the existing aesthetic and dialed it up to 10. We've got the Phantom Ruby Rays in the background, and rather than the Death Egg Sentinels, we've got the Infinite Long Boys from Capital City. Fun bit of trivia here, in the original game, the Infinite Long Boys were meant to be clones of Perfect Chaos, but this was scrapped when Sega decided that this was just too much nostalgia. So what have we learned? Nostalgia is only okay when it's from the Genesis era. Jesus Christ. I'm guessing this is how Chaos was going to factor into the original, but that's just a side tangent. The Long Boys are here, and they're actually interactive this time as the stage ends with Sonic defeating one akin to how you fight Perfect Chaos in Sonic Adventure. Now that is a throwback. Then for the two Mystic Jungle stages, the first one is in a winter tundra, as the entire place is frozen. I love the emphasis on the casino elements in the scenery this time, which were only really prominent in the Casino Forest stage in the original. Then for the second act, the entire forest is on fire as we freefall through, avoiding flaming vines. I love the individual stage gimmicks here, from the bungee vines to the breakable foliage. The second stage feels so high up that it feels like we're always flirting with death. Then we've got our two Death Egg stages, the first of which taking place inside the depowered dead Death Egg that was destroyed in the original game. Here we play as just the Avatar, and I love how the lighting here is so atmospheric. It feels more like a natural result of the fires than the usual powered up Death Egg that we know. And it feels like the Batniks are just lurking around here. Then for the second one, we're navigating the outside of the Death Egg with both Sonic and the Avatar, with this version of the stage having us interact with the asteroids a lot more, rather than them just being, once again, a background element like in the original game. That brings us to the final boss where Neo Metal and Infinite battle against Sonic and the Avatar. I did mention that it is kind of difficult for them to justify bringing Infinite back here, as he doesn't really do much when compared to Neo Metal. At the same time, it is kind of cool to see these two pairings up against each other. Both Sonic and an OC going up against another Sonic and OC, but evil. This takes the form of your traditional modern Sonic chase boss, but it's much more elaborate, as you now have to effectively run through a proper stage with obstacles rather than just a stretch of running space like usual, all while avoiding the enemy attacks. But where this really asserts itself as an awesome boss fight, where the Overclocked team are just showing off, is that with each phase of the boss, you're in a different environment from Sonic Forces corrupted by the Phantom Ruby, including those that didn't make it to Overclocked, like the Metropolis. This brings the whole game together in such an awesome way. The fight itself is most comparable to the first bout with Infinite, where you power through his Phantom Ruby clones. This is a much better final boss than the Sonic Colors copy-paste one from the actual game, as it brings not only all of Overclocked together, but also Forces as well. If Sonic Forces fails at immersion, which it absolutely does, this marks Sonic Forces Overclocked's greatest improvement over the original game. The immersion is genuinely some of the best I've ever seen for Sonic, from running from Starlight Zone to Green Hill, to rescuing a truck of soldiers from Badniks, all within the stage. With Sonic Forces, there was a bit of a disconnect between the comms radio chatter and what was actually going on in the levels. You'd hear all about how other members of the Sonic cast are helping out, but you'd never actually see any evidence of this. You'd just have to take Vector's word for it that he was on the Death Egg. Just one example. In Overclocked, during the Fright Frenzy stage, you actually start the stage with the Chaotix running by your side, and all throughout the Sunset City stage you can see OC characters fighting against Badniks, actually getting to interact with one of Infinite's Longboys, running from a falling Death Egg Sentinel. There's even the flamethrower mini-boss from Sonic 3 in the Mystic Jungle? Jesus! While this is half the length of the original base Sonic Forces, it's got over 4 times the content. What's here blows the original game out of the water. They even added Omochao into the levels, taking the place of the tutorials. What? Overclocked team, you are crazy. Totally crazy. If that's not enough, they've even added some new, kind of admittedly morbid cosmetics to the avatar, and some new Wisp-on variations with some new power-ups not found in the base game. And then there's the music. They've even given this game a brand new soundtrack. The game gets its own main theme, which plays over the final boss by Zakujo and Contagion 705, and it goes hard. It's a lot heavier than your usual Sonic vocal track, a bit more akin to the Titan tracks from Sonic Frontiers. And the vocalist does a really good job too. I get some strong Billy Joe Armstrong vibes from the vocals, which I love. It's kind of like if Green Day collaborated with Otani on a vocal track. Also, Jesus, look at the music video for this. Guys, calm down! Actually, don't calm down. This is amazing! Then the level themes themselves are also excellent, comprising of mostly remixes of the tracks from the original Sonic Forces, with the exception of the music in Green Hill, which is a totally new track with nods to the original Green Hill theme, and the arrangement feels like something straight out of Sonic 06. From there, the music settles into more of a Sonic Forces soft EDM vibe, which absolutely fits, and the remixes feel like meaningful revisitations of the original tracks. Everything here is great. So that is Sonic Forces Overclocked, and it is an astounding achievement. When it comes to a mod, unless the mod is based around fixing physics or glitches, I'm not really going to talk too much about those shortcomings. While the controls have been improved, there's still a lot of issues with the existing Sonic Forces controls in there. And I did encounter one glitch where Sonic and the Avatar got stuck on a piece of geometry in the Death Egg Zone. By no means a massively egregious glitch, but it's a glitch nonetheless. But these do carry over from the original game, so it's not really relevant or helpful for me to really make a point of addressing these. Just know that if you're planning on buying Sonic Forces for this mod, these issues are here. That's the funny thing though, over Christmas, tons of Sonic fans reinstalled or purchased Sonic Forces on Steam just to play this mod. The game was like $10 on Steam at the time, and it still is at the time of recording this video, and it's worth it just for the mod alone. And okay, you could make a point of how Sega are basically profiting off of half-assing a game and then having the fans fix it later, but many members of the modding community have been quite clear that if you want to play their mods, do purchase the game. There is a tendency for studios, Nintendo, to conflate modding and fan content with piracy, and right now, Sega are very chill with modding, so let's not risk ruining that. Of course it's your life, don't let the YouTuber virtue signal to you now. But would I recommend buying Sonic Forces just for this mod? Absolutely. Keep in mind, if you're not in the know, this is just for the Steam version of Sonic Forces, so don't go buying a PS4 copy hoping you can mod it. You can't. Sonic Forces Overclocked not only gives us an extension to Sonic Forces that feels like a self-contained little Sonic game, this entry to the story is a lot stronger than the official base game in just about every regard. I know that there are people that say you shouldn't compare fan works to official products, and there are instances where I kind of agree, because it can be pretty unfair on these small modding or game coding teams who are just making this stuff in their free time out of just a love for the character when compared to actual salaried game developers. But I mean, there are times when it's just like, come on though, how am I not going to compare this to the official product when it blows the official product out of the water? Don't compare Sonic Forces Overclocked to Sonic Forces? But Overclocked is just so much better than it has any right to be, and so much better than the official product. How am I not supposed to compare it? It realizes the potential that Sonic Forces originally had and demonstrates what can be done with the crazy concept of villains winning. How that concept can be integrated into meaningful level design, aesthetics, and gameplay. While it has its flaws, most of which just being leftovers from the original game, Sonic Forces Overclocked is excellent, and manages to hold its own against official products beyond just Forces in its immersion and ideas. I know we all laugh at the old Sega hire this man cliche when it comes to fan game, because 99% of the time the workflow is completely different, but there are passionate, ambitious people with incredible ideas on this team. Clearly, that shouldn't be ignored by any studio. And in some cases, it's not just about practical application, but having creative people on the team. For Pete's sake, Sonic Frontiers, my favorite Sonic game, a game I love, has us running through 3 islands of just grass and rocks, while the first level of Sonic Forces Overclocked has us seamlessly transitioning from Starlight Zone to Green Hill. That is incredible. I haven't seen anything quite like that from Sonic before, and it's those elements that make Sonic Forces Overclocked stand out, more so than just improving the original base game. In the end, Sonic Forces Overclocked goes above and beyond at delivering a satisfying and exciting Sonic Forces experience, the kind of experience the original game absolutely should have given us, and then some. I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you, Overclocked team. A good version of Sonic Forces is absolutely not something I was expecting for Christmas this year. Well, last year anyways. What do you guys think? Have you played Sonic Forces Overclocked? What did you think of it? Comment below, discuss. Do you have any mods that you recommend I cover next? And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to support more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is the link to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month you can get updates on my own Sonic fan project, which is a fan film, as well as getting your name in the credits of these videos. A special shout out goes to the patrons in the $10 tier, and today I'm gonna do that in a Sonic voice. Forgive the sound of whatever that is clattering against the window behind me. It's very, very windy today. So we have, whoa, Glad Goku! Dare Denny, alright. Kale Bennett, that Jordo. Heh, okay. Ken K of Warheads, whoa. Super Hyper Mecha SP Mark II. I turn in New York. Saurus the Skeptic. I can't think of a funny name. You think of one. Yeah, he's gone New York. Then in the $5 tier, we have Kale X, Richard Rogers, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Vera Wild. Thank you folks so much for your generosity, and to those of you at home, thank you so much for watching, and have a fantastic new year. Just get out of here now, go.